First Blood, 1982. Sylvester Stallone plays this kind of Green Beret kind of guy he was behind enemy lines in Vietnam and stuff. So he comes back to some small town and he tries to find some of his war buddies and stuff like that. So some of them died. I think one of the guys at the start that he was talking about, he was looking for, he died of Agent Orange, some of the stuff that they sprayed in Vietnam, and and he got cancer or something like that. Anyway, so as the film kind of progresses and stuff, Sylvester Stallone is kind of like a down and out. Like he when you're involved in what he was involved in, the character in the film, that kind of like brutality and just train just to be a killer. That's it. To go behind enemy lines, so-called enemy lines, and and be a killer. But you're not welcome back in the country that you're fighting for. You're not welcome back, which is a very strange paradox because it's just say when Will Teasel, who's played brilliantly by Brian Dennehy, and he says we don't want guys like you in this town. So what is the point in fighting for anyone? What is the point in fighting for all these kind of things? Because unless there's a war on your doorstep, right? If there's a war on your doorstep, that's different. All these governments, anyway, all these pretend governments, all these nonsensical things that are all set up, they're all against man. Man is against man, and you can't trust any establishment, Vietnam or anything, because they lie to people constantly, and they hack into our warrior instinct to try and get people to go and do what they want to do, but they never tell you the real reason, right? Right, so yeah, so kind of like, just so guys like that, like, we don't want guys like you in this town. Yeah, but when danger comes though, these are the guys that we'll run to. We'll run to guys like this because we know that they can handle themselves, right? And kind of like, and it's like I said, it's a strange paradox, but you're not welcome in times of peace. So First Blood, it was directed by Ted Kotcheff, who also done Switching Channels in 1988 with Christopher Reeve, and it wasn't a great film really, but and Burt Reynolds, and so he directed a few things, but like it is a weird paradox that you're not allowed back in the country that you fought for and that you were willing to give your life for. So anyway, so he fights with the police. The police got what they deserved as well. If you look at the characters in the film, Brian Dennehy and the guy that played a character called Galt in the film, he was in the helicopter and he threw a rock or something like that, and he fell out of the helicopter and he got killed on the rocks below, right? So he like when he was in the police station, like I know it's just a film and all the rest of it, but just to go through it in this way, when he was in the police station, he started hitting him and kicking him on the floor and stuff like that. These people get what they deserve, dude. All right, these people are not humanitarians, all right. I mean, they're just like, oh look, he killed the policeman. Yeah, okay, but he hit him. They were fucking around with him, and even Brian Dennehy's character in the start. Why didn't he just leave him alone? And we've all met guys like this, right? We've all met these guys that kind of like use their position to try and put pressure on you for no reason other than just being, oh, I'm going to have some sort of power. There is no power that way for a start anyway. All right? Real power is no power. That's the only way you can get power. It has to come from the creator. It doesn't come from your ego. That's just false power. It always wanes down afterwards, right? So Rambo really, he just goes into the wilderness and they don't really know what kind of guy, they don't know who they were messing with, right? So the warrior, the true warrior really does live alone. And he's more comfortable in the mountains than he was in the small town called Hope. So even just say like I think one of the reasons why it became such a success, and the films after First Blood were just different really. The first one was really the only one that was based on something that was had meaning behind it, right? But there's aspects of Rambo within everyone, especially men. Like there's aspects of that, like that kind of like killer within us that if we're pushed far enough, who knows what we're gonna do, right? So Rambo was like, when he went into the mountains, he was more comfortable in the mountains away from people and away from the town. He was more comfortable there because he lived like a warrior and that's what he was trained to do through his whole life. So Brian Dennehy, anyway, he was really good in the film. He played Will Teasel, and we all know this kind of guy, right? We all know this kind of guy where it's kind of like I said a minute ago, they'll always try and push you and use his position to try and piss you off. So like I said, these people in the film, they got what they deserved. You're always going to fuck around with the wrong guy at some point. Now, there's a couple of people that I know, one in particular, and he wouldn't be looking for trouble, obviously, as well, but if you didn't know who he was, you might, well, by the look of him, you probably would, but like, you don't want to mess with certain people. Certain people you just don't want to mess with, man, because they're trained for a start. They can fuck you up, and even though they won't want to do it, because usually people that really train in certain areas like martial arts and stuff like that, they don't want trouble with anyone. Why? They'd rather help people than beat them up. You know what I mean? So, but it was a good idea in the film with First Blood that like you don't know who you're messing with sometimes, and you're always gonna run into some guy at some point if you keep messing around with people who is going to give you something that you're not going to be really prepared for, right? So anyway, so then the Colonel comes, played by Richard Crenna, Sam Troutman. He was trained to kill. Period. It was kind of funny. He's a bit cheesy, right? He's a bit cheesy. He'd eat things and make a Billy go puke. Cheesy lines and stuff. But the film worked. So there's another part I wanted to talk about with it is kind of like is that just say when you're making a movie and stuff like that, something might happen with the weather. I may have it now on Sunday. Because you don't know what's going to happen with the weather. There was a part in First Blood, right, where they were filming in this small town in Canada, and there was no snow, and there was no snow there for years, right? So kind of like when they started filming, it started to snow a little bit. So what they done is what they have to do is that they interjected a small scene into it with the media saying basically, a news story about what's happening with this guy that's hiding up in the mountains, and the police are looking for him somewhere above the snow line, blah blah blah. So they covered it as if kind of like there was a tiny bit with no snow because they started filming when there was no snow, and then later on it started to snow a wee bit, and then they had to film. So they made up for it with that one scene with the media saying somewhere above the snow line, so they could get away with it that way. So you have to do that sometimes with movies with weather because something may happen. It may happen with me now on Sunday. There might be wind, there might be bits of rain, and I'm kind of like, well, I'm going to have to try and alter it in a certain way with a certain shot to try and deviate the audience away from the obvious difference in the weather. So First Blood, check it out, good film. One of Sylvester Stallone's best films. And the screenplay was great, the direction was great by Ted Kotcheff. And, a film really worth watching and checking out. I yield.